Hey, how's it going, man?
Going well.
Good. Uh, Kind of seems weird saying, "Hey, we're the Prog Knobs," when we don't have any followers yet. But it's just
That's whatever.
if anybody watching us. But I guess we should, it's just some due diligence we should do. What what do you? Hey, you been doing okay?
Been doing good. One thing that was kind of cool is that after last week, I actually listened to that Return to Forever live album that you were mentioning. But the full 2.5 hour double CD version.
Oh yeah?
So yeah, yeah. So I played that because you'd mentioned it,
Huh.
and it was nice to hear it again. I hadn't listened to it in a long time.
Man,
Um,
you know what? I don't think that I've listened to it since the 70s when I was a kid.
really?
Yeah,
Wow.
I mean, honestly, I don't, you know, and I was actually thinking about that when I mentioned it, because I hadn't thought about it in a
Mhm.
while, and I don't really remember seeing that for some reason. I mean, I've gone through tons of vinyl bins and CD bins and stuff and cassette, and I don't th I haven't run across that very often. So yeah, refresh my memory on it. Honestly, I mean, is it
Yeah.
like the bad period? Is it like the quote, bad and tail end?
Yeah, so it was done after the Music Magic album. So
Um,
you have vocals and you have like a horn section. Um, but the nice thing is that it doesn't really make it bad. Um,
oh, okay.
it still got lots of great playing on it. Um, if you could get past and I say get past automatically, but perhaps you like the vocals of Gail Moran. I don't know. We haven't discussed her. So, but anyway, she's a factor, we'll say that. And
Yeah.
I don't know, I feel like her vocals and Stanley Clark's vocals don't pair well. Because she's high and he's kind of mellow, and I don't know, they just don't sound super great together in my opinion. But
Yeah.
that's okay because you got so much great playing on it. What's
Yeah.
interesting is that the record was like it was a single LP, so it's like what 40 something minutes of music, but the full two CD version is like 2.5 hours.
Huh.
So they did a lot for the album.
Wow. No, it's funny you mentioned Gail Moran because right when we were connecting here
Mhm.
on Zoom, I was thinking to myself like, man, maybe we should talk about Mahavishnu Orchestra, But
Yeah,
wait, she was the vocalist in Mahavishnu Orchestra for a while, wasn't she?
yeah. It was it,
Yeah. All of a sudden, I
beyond
was just like, wait a
the
second, wait,
Fuzak.
am I just imagining that? Yeah,
Yeah,
she was on like,
in the post Billy Cobham years, and
yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, yeah. Okay, no,
beyond the Emerald something. I can't remember the
your
title.
Visions of the Emerald Beyond. Are you a
Yeah,
Mahavishnu Orchestra fan?
I like them.
Yeah, I am. I mean,
That was
that
probably
was,
I gotta say, Intermounting Flame was probably the first fusion album I really bought.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it
Um,
was a good one to get, especially because I was listening to so much Dream Theater and stuff like that at the time. To hear somebody shredding in such a similar way, but in 1972, was pretty eye-opening.
yeah. I actually there's two things I did not mention on the last video we did. One was
Yeah,
that the guy who the record store that when I was a teenager that was playing some prog and fusion stuff for me. One of the things
yeah.
he played was he played what did he play? Oh, he played Intermounting Flame. Yeah, that's what I was
Okay.
trying to remember if it was that or Between Nothingness and Eternity. But he played Intermounting
Mhm.
Flame for me, and I was just like, holy shit! And um, I hadn't heard anything like that before. Back in the
Yeah.
1990 or late 80s. And then I got, so I was like, okay, I'm already buying two $15 records, so I went to the tape section
Mhm.
and, see if I could find any $4 tapes and I found Birds of Fire. And I think
Mhm.
of all their albums, I mean, like when I think of conceptually or, compositionally, there are things I like better about other songs not on that album. But as a
Mhm.
whole, Birds of Fire is just, I just really like that album.
Okay.
As a
Yeah.
whole. For some reason, the tunes and everything and the vibe. I'm not a huge fan. I mean, I'm actually not a fan of John McLaughlin's guitar playing in Mavish. I
Mhm.
mean, like soloing
Yeah.
post.
Yeah.
Well, Mahavishnu Orchestra in. beyond. I like his stuff like right before it, I mean, when he was kind of trying to
Hmm.
find his way, and he was kind of like still kind of had his playing was a little gnarly and rough, and
Hmm.
he was just kind of going for things and everything. But it seems like he really just like found some kind of groove. I mean, which I'm sure just when you're young, you just like something happens and something clicks, and you just kind of like you're like, oh, I'm gonna take off on that path,
Yeah.
and you just like get really good or at that angle really fast, and that's what it seems like you did. And I don't know. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, I guess the guitar was kind of a new thing still, and all that, but I mean, I just don't, him and also Jan Hammer. I mean, like
Hmm.
it's weird because there's certain artists where I love their compositions and I love what the creativity that they're trying to do, but I don't enjoy their soloing, and then those are two guys that like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gail Moran, yeah, I mean, it's like it's funny the friend of mine, Dave Carnes, who we have that other YouTube thing.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think we talked about that in one of them, where it's the thing where jazz guys, which applies to fusion as well. Yeah, I mean, I guess she goes into fusion, where they just think like, oh, we need a singer. Um, hey, she has a vocal degree, or hey, he's got a vocal degree,
Right.
Who's the guy on Road Games, the Alan Holdsworth album? Paul, what is it?
Oh, I'm not sure. I haven't
I
heard
want to see.
Road Games.
You haven't heard that?
No.
Well, he might have been on a couple other Alan Holdsworth solo albums, but I want to say it's Paul Whitehead or Paul Williams. And Paul Williams is
Okay.
the short guy. They're like the easy listening guy songwriter. But yeah. Anyway, same kind of deal. It's just like it's just they kind of have this like. Well, I guess that's what they wanted in a sense, the operatic style, and
Hmm.
but it's like it's not like it just sounds like kind of old lady in church, mixed with this kind of like crazy, off the wall fusion stuff, and it's just
Hmm.
like,
there's a fine line between I guess what Gail Moran brought versus what like Flora Purim brought,
yeah,
where there's similarities but definitely some key differences. Whereas like Flora's similar high pitched singing style worked with jazz, Gail's kind of clashes with jazz in a way.
yeah,
Um,
that's a good way to put it.
mhm. It's like
And I
Flora
mean,
could sing all the same sort of like right. She could sing the right chord or well, not chord, note changes and things like that. That really kind of fits in. Um, I don't feel like Gail Moran's singing just it doesn't quite fit into me the same way. It exists on its own
totally,
plane.
yeah. I mean, it's like it's not about. I mean, and that's a whole that goes like can take a conversation on a whole other level where, musicians just think that they get in a mindset or they just kind of like have a mindset of it's just the notes, achieve performing the notes that matters. It's like,
Mhm.
but they're not thinking about like vibe or style or vocal, like timbre quality,
Mhm.
edge. I mean, it's like those are the things that like a good producer will come in and say like, like
Mhm.
that's not really not the right person for this thing. I mean, like she'd be good
Yeah.
in something else, like, but or he or whatever. Um, yeah, you should listen. I think it's I don't know if that Paul guy's on the first. Have you heard like any of Alan Holdsworth's solo stuff? IOU or
I heard what was it Metal Fatigue? Is that the name of it?
Mhm.
So I heard that,
It's been
and
so long since
then
I've
an early
listened.
album that I think was like he didn't want released. It was Velvet Darkness.
Okay, yeah, yeah. That was I think his first one.
Hmm.
It's like that was like 75 or 76. It's
Yeah,
right after he
I
was.
don't think there was any. I don't think there were any vocalists on it.
No, that was just kind of like a standard mid 70s thing. But
Hmm.
yeah, you might want to check. I think I'm pretty sure it's Road Games that the guy's on. He might be singing on IOU as well, but it's the same kind of deal. It's like I mean, it's just like
Right.
it just doesn't. It sounds like. a younger version of your grandpa singing in church, you know.
You know what also came to mind was on Bill Bruford's "Gradually Going Tornado." The vocals on that one,
Yeah.
those are a real fun fit, and in a way, I like them. But
Yeah.
it's kind of like the same way that I enjoy some parts of the vocals on Tony Banks' solo albums. Um, you know, it's not because they're great, but I don't know, maybe they're charming in a way.
Yeah, man, that's another thing. Who was that? Was that Annette Peacock, I think, who's singing
I
on the
can't
Bruford?
remember. I can't remember the name. I'd have to
Oh,
go find where I
Amanda.
stashed the record.
Jesus. Anyway, yeah, maybe I'll try to look it up while we're talking. But
Uh,
he's yeah, same deal. And you know what's really weird on that first Bruford album, Feels Good to Me.
that's
Um,
another interesting case. Yeah.
that's and by the way, yeah, I mean, and we can talk about this another go into another time. And but I have kind of
Mhm.
like, I mean, an issue with Bruford in general. Maybe if you see me kind of rip on him a little bit on Facebook,
I
but
enjoy reading your Facebook posts about this. I got to
well,
say.
I mean, of course, I was a huge Bruford nut. I mean, I met him.
Uh-huh.
He actually like roughed me up in backstage at a Crimson show in the early
Oh wow.
'90s. Um, well, he escorted me out of the backstage area, in
Mhm.
a rough manner. But I mean, I love the dude. But anyway, aside from what I meant to say, what I want to just condense or go straight to is that,
Mhm.
regardless of what I think of his drumming now in hindsight, I think the best thing he ever did it was the Bruford Band composition stuff. I mean, like that
Mhm.
is just like I was talking about that last. That's another thing I meant to mention is the whole Bruford Band stuff, the late
Yeah.
'70s
Yeah.
prog fusion, the thing where it's like they're trying to be pop, or trying to inject elements that the record companies are saying like, hey, maybe this is more marketable than what you were doing,
Mhm.
um, which is fun. It's just it's almost like that whole thing of some kind of record executive who's not a musician perhaps and just like trying to chase the money, as
You
almost
gotta have
being
a
like,
vocalist to make money.
yeah, it's almost being like some kind of a rogue element that spawns creativity. It's like,
Mhm.
hey, let me throw you for a loop here. We're gonna
Yeah.
keep you on for another album or two, but you gotta start doing something in this angle. And they're like, what do I do? And they come up with this weird mixture of stuff. Maybe
Mhm.
it's more natural than that, or maybe it's a mixture of like outside pressure and just natural
It's
desire. But
interesting in his case because his first album had vocals, the second one didn't, then the third one did. Um, so it was kind of a weird mix from the start.
you're forgetting about the rapping in the second album.
Oh, I am
Yeah.
forgetting about that.
Yeah. Was it
I'll
like
have to go
he's
back to
rapping some
that.
nursery rhymes or something? I forget. The Mad, no, was it? Yeah, Alice in Wonderland, something. The Mad Hatter voice, or the Cheshire Cat, or something.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Which
My
is, I mean,
apologies.
it's like, wait a
Blocked me
second,
out.
are you? I mean, it's kind of funny in a way because there you have, just like some guy from across the pond that's like tapping into rap that's I mean just coming about in the Bronx at the same time.
Right.
I mean, and he's
Why they
just,
would want to address that is beyond me.
yeah, I mean it's like, did he even know? I mean, like I'd be curious. I'd love to see an interview where well, just with any musician where you just kind of like have these oddball questions, like these little things that it's like, where did that come from? Where would that I mean that you'd never read in a normal interview or whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
what prompted that? But Gail Moran. Okay, so anyway, back to the Return to Forever. Was
Mhm.
I mean, of course, Lenny White. I'm sure sounded amazing.
He was not the drummer on that one.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Who was the drummer on that?
Hang on. Let me check real quick. Luckily, at least I knew where I put this case for it. So I looked this up the other day and I couldn't remember the name. It's either Jerry or Gary Brown.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So the
I
drumming's
remember
really
seeing
great. I mean,
there's a guy. He is he on a lot of stuff? I mean, was he kind of like a notable fusion drummer? I mean, he seems like one of those guys that was probably on a lot of things we heard, but his name is just so forgettable that you're like, I don't know if I've heard him.
I'd have to look at the credits again for a bunch of other albums. And nothing jumps out in mind. Like I don't know if he played on any Weather Report. I don't think he did.
I
Um,
think, I mean, if I were to take a guess, I don't know. This may just, I don't know if this is like deep, subconscious triggering, or I'm just making
mhm,
this up. But I want to say that um, maybe like he did some stuff with like Brecker Brothers, or some kind of like
mm,
um, that kind of fusion stuff. Like maybe Joe Farrell. Joe Farrell
okay.
solo albums, or I mean. I don't even know what to call those kind of fusion albums where it's like uh, it's not it's like not David Sanborn.
Mm.
I don't know. To think of a name to call that. Do you know what I'm talking about? Just like Brecker Brothers.
Probably something I haven't quite really tried out much yet. Because usually when fusion starts to air towards the side where it gets more related to funk, a little bit more repetitive, and there's like fewer key changes and stuff like that, I start to get a little bit less interested.
Dude, yes. Yeah,
Mhm.
man. And I'm glad that we just kind of fell into that. I mean, if I would love to talk about that for a second, I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
it's just totally, I feel the same way.
Everybody was drawn to it. It's like it was impossible to
Yeah,
resist.
yeah.
And of course, interest in funk gave way to disco, which was like an even worse thing to integrate into a jazz-based sound.
Yeah, I mean,
The only
there's
tolerable example is maybe on Weather Report's "Mr. Gone." You had that one song, I guess was
yeah,
it
River
Town
People.
or something like that, and it
Was
has
it
a
River
disco beat.
People or the dun 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 dugga 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 dugga
I
dugga
don't think it
dugga.
was that one, but it's got the upbeat accents on the hi hat, and uh,
Man, I thought it was that. It's not the one that almost sounds like this, where it sounds like Jocko's playing Super Mario Brothers theme.
oh, I'm not quite sure. I mean,
Um,
they only thankfully they only did that on the one track, and then it kind of got it out of their system. We know
well,
other people, it seemed like it was virtually unrecoverable. You have like a great drummer like Alphonse Mousson, or however you say his name. I'm going to butcher all these names because I
yeah, I
don't really
mean,
say it
a
out loud.
Muzone.
Mousson,
I think that's what it is.
yeah. So he played on a bunch of those 70s McCoy Tyner albums, and his drumming
Mm,
is awesome. And then you look at what his solo albums became, and it was just like very boring funk based jams.
man,
Um,
that stuff. With that stuff, it's so weird because it's it's like I see what. Okay, so like what ends up, and the same thing is like with the Billy Cobham solo albums.
mhm.
Do you watch Andy Edwards YouTube channel?
No.
Oh, you might dig it. I mean, he's like it's kind of, he does like a prog, and he's like really into prog and fusion, and um he's got a lot of really interesting stuff. I like his
Mhm.
YouTube channel. I definitely check out some things, but he's
Yeah.
got it's really weird. It's like, whenever I'm watching his, I agree with a lot of things that he says in a real like deep way, but
Mhm.
then there's like this line that he goes past, and and he's really, and it kind of touches on what you was kind of brought up, or maybe I brought up in the last video with the whole kind of GRP and late, like Dave Grusin, Lee Ritenour, so this guy Andy Edwards, he'll bag on that stuff.
Mhm.
He calls it Fuzak, like fusion music or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but then he gets really excited about things like Billy Cobham solo albums, or like what you're talking about, where it's like the funky
Mhm.
fusion, where it's like they come up with a riff. It seems to be based on like a riff, and then they just
Mhm.
pick two chords.
Yeah.
It's like it's just alternating between two chords. But there's like a lot of crazy soloing and technical musicianship, but
Hmm.
the structure of the song is just very simple. It's just kind of like, hey, let's pick these two weird chords and you know
Yeah.
get off on them. I mean,
Yeah, and you listen to the first minute and then you listen to the last, and it's like, well, what really happened there in between? It didn't
dude,
really take you on a journey.
you're
It was
right.
just kind of
It's
there, kind
it's
of
like you're there
sort of
for the head. It's
audible
like the
filler,
head and
and
the
then it's
end.
done.
It's
Uh-huh.
like you're listening to the head and it sounds cool. It's like, ooh, wow, they have some kind of like sinister sounding riff that they came up
Hmm.
with. And
Yeah.
then everything in between it, like you said, is just like back and forth between these two chords while they're noodling around. I mean, that that
Mhm.
that just I mean, I guess it just seems like Sideman, um just like a Sideman bonanza. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Billy
Uh,
Cobham's an interesting one to mention because I feel like for the
which
most
one?
part,
Which album?
just in general, when you
Oh,
think about multiple albums here, there was always something good on all of them, but they were not consistent. For
yeah,
every good song, there's a total dud for me, and I'm just like, there's not that one truly great Billy Cobham album to me. Even Spectrum has stuff I don't like.
yeah,
Um, Total Eclipse, I think, almost gets there, and then things after that get a little bit more wishy washy. Um, but even some that seem like they're kind of universally panned, like I guess Magic or something like that, got some really great moments on it. But then it's got some really boring plotting tracks on it too. Um,
yeah,
and I got
yeah.
some of his '80s albums, like I got No Warning, which is enjoyable,
Wait a
but
second. Is that the one from the 80s? Power,
it
yeah.
is, yeah,
Dude, okay, thank you for mentioning that. I will go ahead and say I
yeah,
have something to say about it, but you go first.
sure. It looks like when you look at the cover and stuff like that, you're like, there's no way this could be good. But it's actually okay. I mean, it was better than I expected, but I didn't expect great.
Yeah.
Um, but
Man,
it was
well,
still
listen,
pretty
if I
decent.
if we were in person, I'd
But,
give you a
yeah,
hug right now. I mean,
yeah.
it's because man, I in fact I actually made a video with a friend of mine that he didn't want to. It was the guy I was telling you about that I was kind of talking with about like kind of prog and fusion stuff with about Billy
Mhm.
Cobham,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I went off on those albums just like because you know, Billy Cobham was another guy that I was just in love with drumming when I first got into drumming, and back in the early '90s, and then I quickly just kind of like, well, I mean, somewhere in the mid '90s, I just kind of like, it's like, man, why am I into this guy?
Mhm.
And I had a bunch of his solo albums. I heard his Mahavishnu playing. It just his playing was very monodynamic to me. It just seemed like everything is the same. Obviously the definition, everything's the same volume. And even, I mean, but technically he hits the drum more quietly, but the
Yep.
best way I can think of describing it is like an early drum machine where there's not velocity or there's not like multi sampling on a on a
Mhm.
single uh on a single sound, to where it's like
Right.
in the '90s, they started doing it. They were like, okay, we need to sample like a snare drum being barely hit, and then moderate, medium, and then whack, and then as you play the whatever it being an electronic drum pad or press the button, the velocity sensitive button, it.
Mhm.
I mean, this. I'm just saying it for 5, 6 people who might watch this and don't know.
You
Um,
never know.
the it triggers it in stages, depending on how hard you hit it. So,
Yeah.
but in the early days of drum machine, they just have one sample. So if it was velocity sensitive, you hit it quietly and
Mhm.
you'd still hear a loud sound, but played
Mhm.
quietly. So that's
Right.
that's how I mean that's how I hear his quiet playing, and that's really
Right.
started bothering me. Um,
Yeah.
so I just kind of gave up on the guy, and
Mhm.
I'd seen those albums, those two mid '80s albums, the No Warning, and then there's one right, I think it's Power Up or
Power play.
Power
Yeah.
Play, yeah,
Mhm.
man. So and going back to this Andy Edwards YouTuber, he had this thing where it was like the top 10 worst fusion albums, and those were in it.
Mhm.
I was like,
Oh
okay,
yeah.
well, I know this guy by now to where I need to check those out if he doesn't like him. And I listened. I was like, holy
Yeah.
fucking shit, I love it. This is, I
Yeah.
mean, thank you. I mean, I was looking for a way to get back into, to enjoy something about Billy Cobham. And I
Right.
mean, it's like he really just, it's like, and what I was talking about with this friend of mine, and I'm sorry, I'll stop. I'm just going on. I just got excited. I got excited,
Yeah.
James. But
It
I
happens.
was telling this friend of mine, um, going back to the drum machine thing, it's like he needed to get to the point of MIDI and just
Mhm.
because it sounds like a whole MIDI composed album, or
Mhm.
that's the basis of it, it seems like. And it's like
Yeah.
he just needed to hit that groove where he, it's like an album that sounds like it's MIDI programmed, for him to do his natural thing, which is
Mhm.
sounds like an early MIDI drum machine.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it.
It was what was it actually has a good like the whoever played on it, there's it just has a good sound. Like it's a nice blend of instruments. Nothing is too obnoxious on there. Um I feel like the all the none of the songs are too long or too short. I don't know, it was just pretty pleasant.
It
I think
is.
power play maybe a little bit less so because I think by then I just didn't really like how power play sounded for one. Oh, hang on one sec. I don't know what this call is. For now.
Uh-oh.
Um,
Is it the school? You got to go get your kids.
no, I don't think so. Um, but yeah, power play sounded a little bit more synthetic to the point where I was like, his playing is kind of suffering because of the sound, but it didn't really seem that way on No Warning. No
Well,
Warning was just
see,
kind of
I actually like
it
Power
all
Play a little
sounded
bit.
like a natural fit. Just what they were playing, how it sounded was was good.
Yeah.
Not great, but good.
Well, I thought it was great. I mean,
Yeah,
well, it's not like my favorite album in the world, but
yeah.
um, I want to get both those albums on CD for
Mhm.
sure. And
Yeah.
I actually do like that. I mean, and I got into MIDI programming and stuff. I mean, my I was a drummer and I was completely against electronic stuff and drum machines. And then somewhere in the late 90s, I just kind of realized like, okay, I think the reason why I didn't was so against it was because I just knew that I was gonna love it or something someday. And I mean, for me, I love just a stupid, embarrassing sounding MIDI programmed album.
Hmm.
But not just. I mean, it's got to have some kind of interesting qualities to it. Like some kind of like jazzy chords, or
Hmm.
interesting, like bass, like synth bass stuff that's going on. That's kind of like making the chords sound more
Yeah.
complex, or just some kind of like interesting rhythm. Um, but like there's a couple of Christmas albums that
Hmm.
I love. I mean,
Yeah.
that it's like made in the late '80s, and it's like a MIDI studio Christmas thing, and it's just
Hmm.
it sounds so stupid. And so that his power play and
Yeah.
No Warning kind of fit in there for me. They kind of
Okay.
scratch
Yeah.
that itch.
Yeah. I could see that. Hmm.
Oh,
Yeah.
one thing. I'm sorry. One thing I wanted to say regard just going back to the I mentioned the GRP and the Fuzak thing that this guy Andy Edwards was calling it.
Hmm.
Um, so what I was going to say was that it's weird because like a lot of people get into those kind of like you were saying that the funk fusion, the sinister groove, or whatever that just like is good for the beginning and the end, but kind of is like whatever in the middle. Um,
Hmm.
to me, that stuff is less progressive than like Lee Ritenour or Dave Grusin or that Fuzak stuff. The stuff where it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not straight up smooth jazz, but it's like the beginnings of smooth jazz.
Yeah.
Um, but
Hmm.
it's West Coast jazz is I guess what it's called.
Hmm.
That stuff to me, I mean, like when you just isolate it, is way more progressive. Like when you listen to what's being done, the voice leading, the
Hmm.
chords, the structure of the song, the composition is
Yeah.
way more progressive than that stuff that just has like a sinister riff that just
Yeah,
ultimately ends up alternating between two chords and just like noodling soloing. It's
that's
like,
an interesting take because I feel like this would be a tough idea to sell to people just because I think the music you describe as more progressive tends to sound very synthetic, um, which
yeah,
is a tough sound to get people who like prog rock or anything into. Um, they'll probably see that as because of how it sounds, it's going to be automatically off-putting. Um,
yeah, no, totally. It's like, I don't know, in sometime in the late 90s or so, I just like faced my embarrassment and I embraced it.
mhm,
I mean, I just like
yeah,
I had, and I mean, maybe I went too far with it, but I just enjoyed it. I was just like,
like
there's
ask your
stuff.
family, they'll tell you.
What's that?
I said, ask your family if you went too far with it, they'll tell you.
Yeah. But it's like just kind of like saying like, well, why am I just saying I don't like this? I mean, like,
Mhm,
maybe I don't, but I just found that like digging into these things, you know, there's just, yeah. So if you listen to like those kind of guys, the West Coast jazz guys, I mean,
mhm,
it sounds slick, it sounds smooth, it sounds like, like it's made for a doctor's office in a sense, but
mhm. Yeah,
um doctor's office waiting room or whatever. But I mean, you're like, but when you really analyze it, yeah, it's like, they're playing these guitar lines over these changes, and
mhm,
it's like there's changes happening. There's modulations. They're
yeah,
modulating keys. It's um what is it that there's the guy, I think it's the guy who just died a couple days ago, Sergio Mendez.
mhm.
I don't know if you saw, he died.
I did
Um
see it, yeah.
but I think it's him. Yeah, he's the one. Do you watch Rick Beato channel at all?
No, I
Okay,
haven't
well,
watched it.
he's another guy you might enjoy. He's really
Okay,
into like, I mean, he's like has a huge audience now, and he's kind of has to water it down. But at heart, he's really into prog and fusion and jazz, and he's like also like he'll spend like a lot of time on '90s alternative stuff. I mean, he's
yeah.
kind of like, I mean, it's like one of those guys you're like, I wish he wasn't so watered down, but he'll have things like the most complicated pop song of all time, and I think
Mhm.
it was this Sergio Mendez album. God, what's the name? I should know this. I mean, I love the song. It's just not, I'm 50 years old, so it's just, not at the front of my brain anymore. But
Yeah.
um, it's just, he goes through it, and it's like it just sounds like the most, he's like, this is so perfect because they package it in a way where it's supposed to just like be so appealing to people and so
Mhm.
unoffensive. But then when you analyze it, it's like there's these insane modulation key modulations going on, and
Mhm.
they're playing these polychords, and I mean, it's just all over the place, and it's constantly
Yeah.
changing.
Yeah.
But when you listen to it, you're just like, oh, this is that thing my mom listened to in the car on the way to school when I was a kid.
That's kind of cool. That you could always sneak in these elements and no one would know just because of how it sounds.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, man. So what do you think? Is it worth it, me listening to the Return to Forever live, or again revisiting after what, 40, 45 years?
Yeah, at least some of it for sure. Um, yeah, and you'll probably get a sense of whether you want to keep going with it or not.
Yeah.
Not too long in, because I guess the second song is what a 20-minute version of a song that was probably around 10 minutes on the regular album. So that'll probably be plenty of indication of whether you want to keep going or not. And I would say by the end of the whole thing, it kind of loses momentum to me because there's one song and it's really just like a long bass solo, and I'm like, I don't really need that.
Yeah.
And one thing that's kind of cool at the end is just like a duo bass and piano at the end for a 9-minute song.
Hmm.
Um,
I
so
love
pretty
Chick
neat.
Corea, man. I mean, I
Yeah.
like his solo stuff. I like, I think I mean, I like Return to Forever, but I think of all his stuff, I think I like Return to Forever the least, even though, but I really like him, you know.
Yeah.
His
He's,
solo
I would
album,
say, the way you described John McLaughlin earlier, Chick Corea is kind of the opposite, where he's a player whose solos are really kind of nice to listen to.
yeah, uh-huh.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, they did have the couple of where they went too far into funk, was it Where Have I Known You Before and No Mystery? Um,
Mhm.
but the stuff, I think my favorite Return to Forever one album is the one with Bill Connors on guitar. Like it's the
The
transition, the
Hymn to
hymn
the
of the
Seventh
Seventh
Galaxy.
Galaxy.
Yeah.
Um, I really, really like that a lot. And then,
Mhm.
and I love Romantic Warrior. I mean, that's another one that it's so goofy, man. I mean, it's
Mhm.
like I keep that in my car because well, at the time she was 5. I played it for my daughter when she was 5 in the car, and she
Yeah.
just, I mean, just flipping out. She loved the sounds on it. I mean, it's just like it sounds like, I mean, if like maybe they based video game sounds on that album, like like
Mhm.
whoever Suzanne Ciani or whoever was coming up with the early video game sounds for the arcades and stuff.
Mhm.
It's like, wow, I mean, Chick Corea is really, I mean, we need to emulate this and put it in Asteroids
Mhm.
or put it in
Yeah.
Space Invaders or something.
There's I love hearing things in '70s music that reminds me of video game music from the next decade.
Yeah.
Um, there's and this deviates from the fusion chat a little bit, but on Tony Banks' A Curious Feeling album, there's part of the keyboard solo in a song called You that it sounds like it was directly borrowed for like some of the Mega Man games later on
Huh.
that were on the NES.
I'm gonna have
It's
to
just
listen to that again.
so similar. Like I was kind of shocked when I first heard that. I was like just transported back to playing video games as a kid. I was
Man,
like,
I'm
wow,
gonna have to check it.
that's
I
pretty
kind
cool.
of, I mean, I've owned a few Tony Banks solo albums in the past, but it was one
Mhm.
of those things where it's just like I was just like and I should probably revisit them because this is the '90s, where I
Mhm.
just was like, I don't really like this, but and I think
Mhm.
I don't have them anymore, but
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'm glad you reminded me of it. I'm gonna go back and check those out. We've got 2 minutes left.
Okay.
Anything you want to, I mean, any kind of wrap up statements you want to make about whatever?
Well, I'm trying to think. I didn't even realize we were coming to the end. So
Yeah, I mean, it's it went
uh,
quickly. I mean, we must have had a
it
great
did.
time.
I guess so. No, um, I would need to investigate some of that music you were talking about, the real slick West Coast jazz stuff.
I'll send you
Just to
some
try to,
links.
yeah, yeah, please do, because I think a lot of that I probably haven't bothered with, for reasons where it's just like that slick sound is kind of just a little bit, you know, it sounds too similar to music that I know I won't like, so I haven't pursued
I love
it.
it. Yeah, I'll send you something. Oh, and you know what? One other thing I meant to say that from, we were
Yeah.
talking about our history of learning, getting into Prague. Um,
Mhm.
and you started with Rush. You were talking about your Rush thing, and I completely just skipped over my Rush. I mean, I had there was a guy who was like, and when I was, what, 15 or maybe 14, he's just like,
Mhm.
hey, have you heard Rush? I'm like, no. So anyway, I bought a Rush tape, and then I
Mhm.
was like, holy shit. So I ended up stealing their entire discography from Kmart on Alta Mesa
Oh, wow.
yeah, in Fort Worth, and I ended
Yeah,
up getting busted. I stole it all, and I had nothing more to steal. And then
yeah,
I was like, well, I guess I'll steal this Rolling Stones Steel Wheels album,
yeah,
and the guy busted me. Anyway, well, we're gonna run out of time, but man, good
yeah.
talk, and next time, all
Yeah,
right?
good talking to you too.
Okay,
All right.
bye.
Have a good day. Bye.